The real reason why men date younger women is not because of their physical appearance, their bodies, because you can't even tell who is 18 or 40 nowadays with old plastic surgery and stuff. I said older men date younger women because they're easier to manipulate and they're going to believe everything you say and they're going to be satisfied with a few crumbs. And people went wild.
Loverly presents The Wedding Podcast, a show for those on the road to I do. From relationship advice to wedding planning tips, we break it down. I'm your host, Kelly Khalil, bride-to-be and the founder of Loverly, a DIY wedding planning platform. Over the years, we've helped tens of thousands of couples get down the aisle. And now that it's my turn, I'm not holding back. I'm bringing in my besties, wedding pros, and some brides-to-be you may know to talk through everything from picking the perfect venue to mastering your relationship. It's time to plan smarter so you can focus on the happily ever after. You've got the ring, we've got the rest. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This week I am sitting down with Kornelija Koko Slunjski, the content creator, podcast host of Bougie Best Friend, dating coach, and Instagram dating guru. We talk all about her best advice for dating, how to know whether it's true love or a toxic relationship in disguise, and her advice for anyone who's been invited to a wedding who's looking for love. Enjoy! Hey, Koko, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
I feel like since I met you maybe about a month and a half ago at one of our Loverly events, started following you on Instagram, and I knew that I needed to have you on the podcast because your advice that you give it's the advice that I wish that I had in my early 20s when I was single and dating. And so it's so relatable, it's so direct, and I think you have so much value to share with people who are looking for the right person, but also just general life advice. So I want to know how this all came to be. Tell our Loverly listeners how Koko Beauty, your Instagram, came to life.
Yeah, so as the name says, Koko Beauty, I used to be in the beauty space. I used to be a makeup artist, and I always loved working with women. I was always creative. So originally, when I started with the social media game, it was more beauty focused, and I was posting my makeup tutorials and stuff like that. And I always enjoyed making women feel beautiful. And, when you do somebody's makeup for the very first time, like that their reaction when they see themselves in the mirror, I loved those moments. And yes, I did photo shoots and editorials and, New York Fashion Week, but working with clients was something that I really loved. So I always loved helping women. I didn't really, and that was when I was in my 20s. And in my 20s, I was also trying to figure out who I was and what I want to do in life. And I was always very drawn to the beauty space. But I was always that friend in the friend group where people go when they need advice or when they want somebody to tell them, the reality of the situation. Because sometimes we have a situation and we don't want anybody to tell us what to do. We just want a shoulder to cry on or something. But they knew when they come to me that I'm going to tell them if they want to. Obviously, I can also just listen and not say anything. But if they want real, no bullshit advice, they're going to come to me. So during the pandemic, obviously the whole world shut down and we were all re-examining our choices and our lives and stuff like that. And I was doing the same. And because I was posting, I've been on social media for a long time and that's something that I always wanted to do. And I studied journalism, so I was always looking to be in the social media space. But with the pandemic, I just didn't know what am I going to post about, like new mascaras. It just felt very out of place. And I was going through a transition. And at the end of 2020, I was living in New York at the time. And at the end of 2020, a lot of production companies were moving down to New York. At the end of 2020, a lot of production companies were doing photo shoots in Miami because Miami was open. So I was flying back and forth. And I realized that I'm so happy here in Miami that sunshine and fresh air and ocean really does something amazing for mental health, especially after the pandemic. And I found myself very happy in Miami every single time when I was coming here. So when my lease was up in New York, I was just decided to move down to Miami and see what happens. And when I moved to Miami, that was 2021, January 2021, I wanted to change my content. And because with the pandemic, I just realized that makeup doesn't fulfill me as much as it did before. So when I moved here, I was like, okay, fresh start. Let me just try something new. And that was around the time when TikTok started really blowing up. And I remember I asked all of my friends, what should I do? What kind of content should I post? And they all told me, like, just do makeup. You're so good at makeup. And I was flattered, but it's just not it anymore. I love beauty. I love working with beauty brands, and I do tutorials and stuff like that on my social media, but it wasn't hitting. I wanted to connect with people in a different way. So I was trying out different types of content. I was, doing like my morning routine, my morning smoothies and stuff like that. But that was, again, not as personal as I wanted it to be. And then I remember one day I was sitting on my couch, no hair, no makeup, just recording to the camera. And I started this series, Things I Wish I Knew Before I Moved to Miami. And I was just spitting facts, just like it's a party city, nobody works, but everybody's rich. And it was like a lot of humor in it. And I just never saw that many people react to something I said, because before I wasn't really putting myself out there. I was posting photos and stuff like that, but I was never speaking to the camera, and I was never really telling people what I think. And I just found it very interesting that people were reacting so positively and negatively. And then one thing after another, I started posting just like spitting facts. And there was this one video that was kind of the beginning of my dating. I'm not a dating coach or dating expert. I was not trained to be anything dating related. I'm just a girl who's 32 years old who went through a lot of shit in her life, and she kind of can read through situations. So,
and you keep it real.
Yeah, and I'm European, so I think that's a big part of where my candor comes from. It's just like, this is how it is. I don't have time to waste. So there was this one video that blew up, and ever since then, everybody kind of knows me as the dating girl, even though I post a lot of different content on my page, but I'm sure we're going to get into that.
So the dating content is what really stuck out at me, because I have a number of girlfriends that are in LA, in New York, single, dating, and just hearing how, that's like a different chapter for me. That's almost, 10 years ago, but I still remember the angst. And what I think resonates in your content is how authentic and direct you are. And it's funny because you and I met, like I said, a month ago at that event. Yeah. Briefly. We were chatting, and then watching your videos, I'm like, oh, I know her. I know you, right? And so it's this very authentic type of messaging and approach that I think is really refreshing. And so I'm not surprised that it blew up, and that's why people are coming to you. So your background was in beauty, which is why your handle is Koko Beauty. But you've now kind of pivoted more to being this kind of, I would say, relationship, dating guru on social media, TikTok and Instagram. And so one of the things that I thought I'd love to talk to you about is, just general dating advice, right? Like, you've been out there, and I'd love to kind of hear, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, like, what are the things that you wish that you knew? And maybe it's the highlights of some of the videos that have gotten the biggest response on social.
Yeah. There was this video that I posted recently that is getting a lot of heat till this moment. I posted, the real reason why men date younger women is not because of their physical appearance, their bodies, because you can't even tell who is 18 or 40 nowadays with old plastic surgery and stuff. I said older men date younger women because they're easier to manipulate, and they're going to believe everything you say, and they're going to be satisfied with a few crumbs. And people went wild, and they're like, you can't tell me that women look hotter when they're 40 than 18. And I was like, first of all, I look so much better now when I'm 32 than when I was 20. When I was 20, I didn't even know how to I didn't know what fits me well. You're so confused. Like you're trying on different, styles every 2 days. Like one day you're going to look exactly like your best friend. The other day you're going to dress like you don't know who you are when you're in your 20s and you're not as confident. And when I was in my 20s, I was always dating I was always dating that older guy because I was very flattered that they would come to me and they would think that I'm so special. But now, looking back, I realized that I just believed their stories. And now I see that half of those things were not true. And back then, the term love bombing and narcissism, nobody talked about that, but that was absolutely happening. So I think that in your 20s, the biggest advice in your 20s, don't focus on trying to find a boyfriend. Focus on yourself and trying to figure out who you are and try different things and travel. And obviously dating is a part of your life in your 20s, but don't try to find your quote unquote soulmate. Just do you go on different dates with different guys so you can see what you like, what you dislike. You might think that you want this specific type, but you think that you want that type because maybe your friend has a boyfriend that's similar. You see your family that is kind of in that, I used to always think that I want a guy who is a finance guy, that like is a hedge fund, or that I don't know, something like that.
I went through that phase too. Just FYI, dating in New York. I dated a few of those finance bros and learned real quick that was not going to be a long-term sustainable. Not that there's not good finance guys out there. So just disclaimer, but there is an archetype or a persona for that New York finance guy.
Yeah. Finance bro that, I also had a lot of friends in the field. So I saw firsthand how, let's not generalize, but they're not, they're not the most, you wouldn't really bring them home, if you know what I mean. But yeah, so I just always thought that I want certain things, and then just, you plan and life throws you in a completely different direction. So I think that I just learned that you need to be open. Don't waste your 20s being in a relationship with somebody for like 5-6 years. And if that happens for you, and if you meet somebody and you guys are like just hitting it off so well, like kudos to you, go ahead. But I remember when I was in my 20s, I was always just looking for a boyfriend. And I wish I wasn't doing that. I wish I was doing more like self-exploration and growth. And I think, that's a big advice I would give.
It's a big trap. I totally feel that. And I remember when I first moved to New York in my 20s, you end up dating who your friends think is cool, or what the idea of the person that you think you want to be with. And it rings so true because looking back now to the guys I used to date, I always dated athletes or other entrepreneurs or bankers or whatever it was. And then there was a competitive nature. In reality, I am an A-type person. I, want to command a room, right? And when I would date people that I thought I should be with, what ended up happening was we would end up competing with each other, or it wasn't complimentary, or they would be, they would trigger me or I would trigger them, and it would be this whole thing. And then it was always like a fight of the egos versus like, oh, this is what a fulfilling relationship's like. And I went in that circle over and over and over again. And one of the things that I love that you've kind of created as your hashtag, or the series as hashtag what would Koko do? And like, it's kind of this mentality of like, oh, wait, what am I doing? Right. And what would, someone who's now aware of the pitfalls, like how would they look at this situation? I think that's like such a cute, but also like real talk kind of like archetype of going to, right? So what are some other like what would Koko do, advice or videos that you've put out there that you feel like has resonated with, because it's not just millennials, it's Gen Z. It's like the younger generation.
There's so many. It's people from all different ages. I have women who, went through a divorce, and they're like, I find it fascinating that I'm learning from a 32-year-old and I'm like in my 40s, but the same thing. They just rushed into marriage and they just got stuck with the same person. But what I would say, the repeating theme of, and I've been doing What Will Koko Do for the past 2 years. So every Tuesday and Friday, I drop a question box and I answer around 30 to 50 questions. So it's a pretty intense program. And sometimes I record them as a podcast episode and then I drop it on YouTube and my podcast so people can catch up if they missed it. So it started with a lot of dating questions, and it kind of transferred into also entrepreneurship and, how to, I mean, I moved here when I was 22 on my own from Croatia. So people like to know about my mindset and how I did it. But when it comes to dating questions, still this day, I don't know how, but it's always like, what if he doesn't paying on the first date? And me coming from a very traditional European, I don't know. And it's not just the first date. I can't even when somebody's like, okay, he paid for the first date, but then he was like, the second is on you. That never even, I don't know. Like I don't understand how these type of men, that's not a man for me. I don't. It's just like, and then people go like, oh, you're such a gold digger. I'm like, gold diggers don't go for dinners. Gold diggers go after boats and planes and Birkin bags. Like a $50 chicken is not really gonna make it. So that was another video that I posted recently when people were just like,
they were losing their minds.
Angry.
I read the comments in it, and
yeah,
it's really polarizing to say that, because it's interesting, because I also, my father came from Lebanon, traditional Middle Eastern, and he raised 3 very independent daughters who are all entrepreneurial, who all make their own money and have their own careers. But at the same time, and again, I saw that you got a lot of hate for this, so I'm just going to put a little asterisk here. Like, that is something that I feel also is important, that like, a man opens the door, that a man offers to pay for the bill. I don't know. Maybe that's, I'm old school and I'm traditional, but like that resonates with me as something that feels familiar, because that's how my father was, right? And so you model after the relationships, in your family or in your culture. So, but I saw that people went nuts.
Oh, they're always, and that's the thing. Like, I've been talking about dating for, I guess, over 2 years now, and that question still gets, I feel like if I drop a video about this every single day, I would reach 1 million in like a week, because people are just constantly triggered with the fact that women want men to pay on the first date. And then, I mean, let me correct myself. I want a guy, if you're listening right now and you're dating a guy, I want him to pay for every meal until you guys are exclusive. That's just where I come from. And you don't have to agree with it. Obviously, like, people split, like, not split things, but you don't have to. You can obviously contribute in different ways. You can, buy tickets for a show, or you can organize a whole day for you guys. But I just don't like this concept of like, okay, you did this and then I'm going to do this one. It's just like tit for tat. I don't want a relationship like that. And I never had that experience, honestly. And I was dating in New York, but I never had those cheap guy experiences. And when I see so many women going through it, it blows my mind. Like, I would literally want to have a one-on-one conversation with every single one of them, and just like, how do you, and then a lot of girls come to me and they're like, but I feel like I owe him something if he pays for my dinner. And then we get into a deeper conversation of your self-worth. Like, do you think that your worth is determined by him paying for a meal? Like, you need to do something internally. And trust me, I had phases in my life where I felt like I owe everybody everything because they did something nice for me. But that's also why I now see that that was a self-worth issue. So it is much deeper than that. So when people are so triggered by my videos, you need to work on it. It's like, you can disagree or you can agree, but like, if you have such a strong negative reaction on a video that you see on the internet because somebody said that, you should ask for a little bit more from life, maybe you can, take a look inside and see if there's something you need to work on.
I think one of the themes that's pretty common just in your content that you put out there is around self-worth and knowing yourself and understanding kind of what you want, which is something that I feel a lot of women in our early 20s were in this external validation, people-pleasing phase, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt that shift happen for me in my 30s, right? Like, as I came into my 30s, I started really thinking about what it is that I wanted, what made me feel good. And really, I would say the same thing, went on a self-worth journey of figuring out, because a lot of people-pleasing behavior, a lot of wanting people to like you and going above and beyond for a potential, partner, that's all a symptom of feeling not good enough inside or feeling that there's something missing. And look, I know when it comes to like long-term relationships and partnership, that a lot of people, they do find their partners when they're early 20s, even some of them in high school and college, right? That for me personally never resonated. I didn't find my partner until I was 34 years old, right? And we're not even married yet. And I'm, almost, I'm not gonna say my age, but it's been a while. And so not to judge people who find that person in their early 20s, right? But for me, it would not be possible because the amount of growth that I personally had between, 23 and 33 was I almost felt like I became a new person, like a different person.
100%.
And I think that's part of one thing that I say when people come to me like, weddings, wedding planning, they all want to talk about the wedding planning. I always pause to be like, but how's the relationship? What's that partnership look like? Right. And not saying that's not impossible by any means, but the data is there that when I started Loverly over 10 years ago, the average age for couples getting married was women were 27 and men were 28. It's now 32 and 33. Wow. So it's moved up, and to see that big of a jump, right, in a 10-year period, that's a cultural shift that's happening. And I think it's a focus on people really wanting that personal development, that curiosity of who I am and what I want. And to your point, there's women watching and reaching out that are in their 40s going through a divorce. And a lot of that is because they never took the time to know themselves, right? And to know what they want and need in a relationship. And that's one of the things that I feel very fortunate about, that like here I am later in life in partnership and I'm not saying it's easy. There's still kind of issues that people deal with on the day-to-day in relationships, right? But I'm more grounded in who I am.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, like, for myself.
When you're in your 20s, if you don't even know who you are, how can you know who you're meant to be with forever if you're thinking about getting married? Because as you said, you were a totally different person. And when you think about this, when you were dating, remember your boyfriend in high school. At that time, you thought he was the best one for you. And imagine you ended up marrying him. Because then you were
my high school boyfriend turned into a drug addict and a gambler. Although he was very cool in high school and was top of his class, that fell off real fast.
Was he the bad boy in the school?
No, he wasn't. He was actually the opposite. It was like repressed, good guy, that like straight A student, super smart, baseball player, and then like left his parents' house, and then really all his inner demons came out.
Something just came to my mind when I asked you, was he the bad boy? Another advice I would like to share is that true love is not full of fights and constant ups and downs and so much drama and so much passion and volatility. And I know that we sometimes, and that's one of my biggest learning lessons in my 20s, that I always thought that's what love is. And my parents had a really normal relationship. They're like still married. And I didn't learn that from home, but I learned that from all the movies and that's what I thought love was supposed to be. And that's the kind of love I was seeking at that point. But all those, you're constantly in that fight or flight mode. And I think that's just not healthy. And sometimes people mistake anxiousness with love because they have these butterflies, but that's actually your body signaling you that something is not really how it's supposed to be. And then people later on maybe get into a relationship with somebody who is actually good for them, and it feels boring because it's safe and it's healthy and it's not, you're constantly trying to find something to fight around. And I also remember I have a boyfriend now for the past 2 years, very healthy relationship. And it's, I think, my first healthy relationship, honestly. And sometimes I see myself like picking a fight because I'm like, oh, everything has been great for a week. Let me see maybe a little bit. And he's like, yo, what are you doing? And then I'm like, okay, yeah, sorry. I forgot this is the healthy one. So it takes some time.
What you said is totally true. I remember in college specifically, there's like a fine line between like like that feeling of butterflies in love at first, which is basically an intoxication. It's a fleeting feeling that sometimes it
Yeah.
lasts 3 weeks, sometimes it lasts, a year and a half or 2 years. It's a chemical reaction that happens in your brain that tricks you into seeing all the good things in someone, right? Like, and it's that butterfly feeling, which is exciting. But then it kind of feels a little bit like anxiety too.
Yeah.
So that I think people get addicted to that angst and they think that's what love is that nervousness. Are they going to call me? Am I going to see them? Is it and that is essentially the underlying principle of a toxic relationship, is that instability and that insecurity and that, oh my God, are they going to call me back? And I mean, girl, that was, I went through all of that. And not just me, I saw it with so many of my friends. And my first friend that got engaged and got married, she literally was the girl that would like love bomb on, like she would find a guy, become obsessed. They'd be together nonstop for like 3 weeks straight right after their first date. And then, they would be so intense for like 6 months, then would break up, and the breakup would be like devastating. And like, she'd be on the floor. We have to go like raging and like go get drinks all day. Like it'd be always like a full,
Yeah.
Meltdown. And then when she found her husband, it was like, we used to be like, oh, it's so boring. Like it's sobering. Like, and like we would joke about it, but like that is, here they are 10 years later, 2 kids, totally normal. And I think you're right. Like we think it's boring because we get addicted to the drama.
I had a hard breakup at some point, and I just didn't, and I'm the type of person that I just want to understand why something happening so I can deal with it easier. And I don't know if this was grammatically correct, probably not, but I was going through a breakup that was really painful, and I was just trying to figure out like, why does this hurt so bad? And what I realized is that when you're going through a breakup, your brain is releasing some kind of chemicals as if you're coming off a drug. So whenever you're on your phone going through your photos or going through their social media, you're getting that hit and you feel like you're back in it. And that's why maybe you're like, oh, let me text him, because you want that. You want your dose, you want that drug kind of, that's why you have all these songs like Love is Like a Drug, but there's something behind that. You actually feel like you're coming off a drug. So that's why I always say when you're going through a breakup, you need to cut all contact, block them on social media, remove their friends. If if they might not do it, they didn't do anything wrong, and that's totally fine, but you have to separate yourself from that part of your life, because you're never going to heal if you're constantly in the middle of it. If you're seeing,
Like in the wound.
Yeah, like they're traveling right now. Oh, maybe he's with another girl. Or if you don't know what he's doing, it's going to be so much easier for you to move on. And I think you should cut all contact with your ex if you're trying to heal and move on.
I think that is excellent advice. I want to switch gears a little bit to being in a relationship and kind of elevating expectations for what we should be expecting, right? Like, how do you think women need to be increasing their standards when it comes to partnership?
I think it's different for everyone. So what's the bare minimum for some might be, super high expectation for the other ones, but we want to change that. We want everybody to, the bare minimum for me at least should be obviously respect, communication. When I remember myself before in my previous relationships, communication was never respected enough. So if my boyfriend would go out and he wouldn't call me, he wouldn't text me, that was always a discussion. Like, oh, why can't you call? Like with my boyfriend right now, there's no issue. So that was, and that created it created a lot of insecurity and trust issues in me early on. So that's something that I think you need to just tell him, listen, and everybody has different non-negotiables and deal breakers. So you have to, in the very beginning of your relationship, when you guys are like, okay, we're serious now, tell him what is really important for you. So what is really important for you, maybe communication, like if we have a problem, if we're fighting about something, please don't go slam the door and go in another room. Please, let's just talk about it and tell him what is really important for you. And if you have these issues from your past, feel free to share them so he can understand where you're coming from, because nobody's going to read your mind. and you also like maybe you have some patterns in your life that you picked up from your parents, the way they were fighting or the way they were communicating. I know that a lot of people probably grew up in toxic households where people were just yelling and screaming and insulting each other. Like when somebody, I would never let somebody insult me. I would never let my boyfriend today tell me that I'm dumb or stupid, or we don't use those type of words. And that's absolutely not acceptable if somebody used that. Like for me personally, some other people maybe don't have an issue with that, but I demand respect in my relationship, because if you don't have respect, everything else is going to fall apart. Respect, communication, and those type of basic human, I don't even know if I'm answering your question correctly,
No,
but
you are. I think you
yeah.
are. I think the non-negotiables is really important. And I agree. It's different for every single person. Like for me, it's like integrity. Like if you say you're going to do something and you don't, it breaks
Yeah.
trust. And then it's really hard for me to basically go back.
And
Right.
to
Like
take you seriously.
yeah,
Like
it's hard.
I can't respect somebody if they're constantly saying they're going to do something and they don't do it.
Yeah.
Then just don't talk about it. And I tell my boyfriend sometimes, like, I mean, he's pretty good when it comes to keeping his promises, but I don't know, we just bought something like a week ago that we didn't still build, like a shelf or something. And I'm like, let's just, when you say we're going to do it, let's just do it together. Because when you keep on postponing certain things, it's like, why do we need to talk about, like, why can't just things get done when you say they're going to be done? So, I mean, that was not the greatest example, but I know that, if your boyfriend is promising that he's going to change, or he's going to stop doing this, or he's going to do that, or he's going to do that. I mean, words and actions,
Matter.
actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, for me, like I said, integrity is really important because I feel like it ties into all of those things. It ties into communication, follow through, trust, right? And that is something for me that is a non-negotiable. And I think also looking at my father as an example, right? A lot of times we mirror relationships that we've seen in the men in our lives. My dad is like of the utmost integrity. If he says he's going to do something, he does it. And if he doesn't, something's wrong. Like, so it's almost like when something doesn't happen that I'm supposed to,
Yes.
I'm like programmed, like, oh my God, like, is he in an accident? He didn't call me when he said he was going to. I go to the worst case
Yeah.
scenario because it's such an extreme thing for me personally to have someone with low integrity. So, and it's not just in my romantic relationships, it's in my personal relationships too. Like, I can't be friends with people who are not honest or say they're going to do things and don't come through. So I also think another thing, and it goes back to kind of knowing yourself and setting those principles, is even, in a long-term relationship or before you get into it, right? Which is like as you're dating, being really honest about what's important to you as far as lifestyle. Like for me, health and fitness is really, really important. Like eating well, being physically active, right? Like I'm not someone who's into drinking a lot and partying. That's just not my vibe. It was in my 20s and 30s. I wanted to, go to the Hamptons and rosé all day or whatever. That's just not my vibe anymore, right? And so I think aligning on kind of what's important to you as far as lifestyle design is really important. Like
Lifestyle and goals. And, maybe today you guys are both in college and you are still trying to figure out what you want to do, but you know that your goal is pretty similar. Maybe somebody wants to move to the suburbs and just have a 9-to-5 job and live a very calm, normal life. But if you're dating somebody who wants to travel the world and they want to explore and they want to, I don't know, that's never going to work. It might be exciting in the very beginning, but you're setting yourself up for failure if you don't have the same goals. Because same thing when I was in my 20s, I loved to go out and drink and party, and I was the biggest social butterfly. Right now, I don't want to leave my apartment. I literally don't want to leave my apartment because I am just happy with who I am and I'm at peace. And before, when I was trying to figure out who I was, that's when I was going out and doing all these things. But now I'm like, okay, I'm good. Now I know who I am and I'm very comfortable to be home. And I'm lucky that my boyfriend is the same way. I couldn't be with somebody today that, wants to. And for example, some people love going out and stay out till 4, 5, 6 a.m. That's not me anymore. But it was 2 years ago. And two
Yeah.
years ago, I was trying to find a guy who's going to do that.
Switching gears a little bit, your background, you've kind of been through a lot of challenges and life transitions, right? You moved from Croatia to the United States, right? You had a career, as a successful makeup artist in the beauty industry in New York, and now you've kind of transitioned to this whole other career in Miami as like a content creator, right? What is your advice when it comes to kind of these transitions and persevering? Because I know resilience is a big thing that you speak about. Kind of how has your personal history kind of informed how you're giving advice now to women in transition?
I think you just need to follow. I really don't want to sound like a cliche, but like you really need to follow your heart, and you really need to do what you're the only person that knows what your biggest desires and dreams are. And you know what? It's very interesting. I don't really talk to people about my plans because I don't want their opinion. And because I want to follow what I feel that I should do. If I tell you, for example, when I started posting my dating advice in my videos, there was so many people that had something to say, or they were saying like, "Oh, I had quote
People
unquote
you knew?
friends."
Friends?
Yeah.
Or, oh, okay.
Yeah, some people that I knew that I'm obviously not friends with anymore. There's always going to be people who are going to comment negatively when you try to change. Because think about this. You guys are, let's say you're in the same friend group and you are currently all at the same level. Maybe you all have the same job. And then here you are, you have an idea and you're actually trying to make this idea come true. So you are going to separate yourself from this group, and this group of friends that you have right now, maybe they're going to tell you not to do that because they don't want to lose you, because they know that you're going to grow and they know that you're going to abandon the little group that you guys created. And that's when I was starting my content. A lot of people were like, yo, this is because the content was, kind of dramatic and a little totally different
Provocative.
provocative. Yeah, a little provocative. I had people that are like, oh, Coco, this is cringe. Like, I wouldn't post that. I'm like, oh, so don't post it. You don't have to post it. That's the beauty
You don't have
of it.
to watch it either.
Exactly. So there's gonna be a lot of people who are gonna be like, yo, where are you going? Why are you growing? Why are you trying to be different? Why? I mean, even when I was in Croatia, when I was telling people I'm gonna move to the US, people were like, Coco, come on, like, it's all right. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. We love you. You don't have to tell us you're gonna do something, because they knew that it's impossible for them. But I always know when there's a will, there's a way. And maybe that's also the Aries in me, but I will never stop until maybe I'm going to realize something is not for me. I thought that I'm going to live in New York forever. And now I'm so happy in Miami. So it's normal to change your opinion, and you can always shift your focus. I studied journalism when I was in Croatia because I always in PR and I always wanted to be in the media space. But I realized that I would rather be, let's say, the talent versus, I have my podcast, so I'm interviewing people but I'm also creating content. So I'm kind of getting both. I don't have to,
and also the kind of like the strategy.
And before I thought that I only wanted to be behind the scenes, but now I realize that, you don't have to just limit yourself to one thing. You can do different things, and your content, let's say if you're working in the content space, your content is going to evolve. When I started with my dating advice, it was way more provocative, and I was just, trying to blow up and go viral, to be very honest, because, that's what works on TikTok. But then I realized that I don't want to be known just for viral, dramatic statements. And I'm looking at this as my career and not as, a few years of attention and then going away. And my goal is to really help people and to, maybe don't have to agree with everything I say. Obviously, we're all different, and you can take my advice and then see if it works for you or if it doesn't work for you. Obviously, we're all different. But my intention is to help people and kind of give them inspiration and show them that it's possible. I mean, even the podcast, I started a podcast on my own, and I knew that it was going to be so much work because I never did it before. But because I started the podcast, and I constantly telling, my followers that it was hard and it was difficult, but I did it. and that inspires them to start something they always wanted to start. So I think that's a beautiful thing when you can inspire other people by, failing kind of sometimes,
You said a couple of things that I think is extremely powerful. One is around the people you surround yourself with and the group of friends that you're with. Because I know who I was friends with. I've kept friends along the way, right? But as friends from college or friends in my early 20s or friends from, my early 30s, you outgrow people. And a lot of that is because, if you know what it is that you want to accomplish and you're going for it, it's really hard for some people around you because of what you said exactly, is that they have to look inward and say, oh, I would never do that. I couldn't do it. And sometimes it's triggering for them, or they can't support you because it would make them look inward to say like, oh, why am I not asking for more or looking for more? And this happens. I've seen it happen, not just with career, because that's a big thing, right? But it happens in relationship when you see somebody who you're in a group of 5 girlfriends that are single, that are going out together. It's like your squad, and then one of them gets in a relationship, right? And oftentimes the narrative in those groups can be, oh, she's in a relationship now. She doesn't care about us anymore. Like they try to almost like vilify.
Guilt trip her.
Yeah, exactly. That like, oh, you're now in a you're now in a relationship. Like, oh, it's not healthy or whatever it is. But it's
Yeah, you guys are spending too much time together. You guys shouldn't do that. You have all these rules for her, right?
Yeah. And so I feel like I've seen that in, in my early 20s and in my 30s as people peeled off. But then what was interesting is my group of friends, we were all single together for a very long time. And, we'd go out on Thursday nights together. There was like 5 of us, girls and guys. And it was crazy because within 18 months, or not even, it may even been like 6 months, right? 6 months, we were all in serious committed relationships. In 18 months, 2 of us of the 5 were married. Within 24 months, all of us were engaged. I mean, it happened all because we were all, as a group of friends, in that same kind of life stage where we were ready for that transition, and we all supported each other in that. And also there is the impact of when you see somebody who's in a healthy relationship or who's happy, all of a sudden it makes it possible for you. And you're like, oh, I actually want that, and I could have that. And that's really cool that their partner is still really fun but also has a great career and respects them and communicates. So I do think, going back to what you said, the most important thing oftentimes is the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and that impacts, what you think is possible, that impacts your self-talk and your self-worth because they're reflecting it back to you. So
you know what? You always feel who's good for you, who's not good for you. And I think that sometimes we choose to ignore that intuition because you've been friends with somebody for a very long time. But you always know, just think about this. If you are listening right now and you're thinking whether or not you should break up with that friend, next time when you talk to them or you hang out with them, when you come home, are you feeling better about yourself? Do you feel like they uplifted you? Do you think they, provided some value? Did you at least have fun, or you just feel like you just got hit by a bus?
How do they make you feel? Or sometimes I even think about like how I feel about going to hang out with that person. Am I getting nervous? Like, are they going to judge? Like, I had some friends, I remember when I was going to meet them in the city for lunch, I'm like, I would be over focused on what I was wearing and how I was doing in my makeup to meet up with a girlfriend. I'm like, why? Why do I care so much about how I'm looking to go meet up with a girlfriend? And I realized because I felt deep down that those friends judged me on, oh, am I in shape? Which maybe that's something I created, maybe not, but there was something underlying in that relationship that was not, the best for me. And sometimes you work through those and you grow through those. Other times you you say goodbye to those friendships and they're done. But sometimes because people can grow and change, you can also come back together. And I've had many friendships where I took like 5-year breaks from girlfriends and then we reconnect and we're like, oh, we're good. Like, oh, I remember why. Like, we were just going through we were not aligned at that time,
Yeah. Because everybody's growing at a different speed, and sometimes the internet is trying to rush us and think that we all have to do the same thing at the same time. And maybe you guys, yeah, you just had to go through your own separate phases.
Okay, I want to go a little personal, Coco, see what you'll share. So you have shared that you're in a relationship for the last 2 years. I'm
Yes.
curious, as this woman who's teaching other women, how to be in relationship, how to build self-worth, self-confidence. How do you think about long-term relationship and with your partner? Like, do you want to get married? Is that something you're thinking about? Are you having conversations?
We definitely were not planning to be in a relationship when we originally met because we both moved to Miami separately from New York. He moved for his business and I moved kind of for my business, but I moved because I wanted to just live in Miami. And it started off very casual, but we quickly realized that we don't want to. And he's a very private person, so dating somebody who's in the social media space was not really, on his list. But why I started dating him and why I kind of realized that he is, my partner, he just made everything feel so normal. And I never questioned myself. And I never I never thought like, oh, where's this going? Like, are we on the same page? Do we want the same things? And even now, after 2 years of being together, we don't talk about marriage in a sense like, oh, let's do it, after you do this. We don't talk about it in that way, but we often tell each other like we are in this, for real. I mean, we live together and we are getting a puppy. So I think everything is, we are
commitment.
building. Yes, we're building a life together, but I would obviously love to get married and have a beautiful family, but that's not something that I need right now today. If it happens, amazing. But I don't know, right now we're like both building our career. We're doing it together. Maybe, you never know what's going to happen. He's actually currently at a bachelor party for his brother that is getting married by the end of the year. So, I mean, in October this year. I don't know. Maybe they're going to talk him into proposing me soon. I have no idea. We'll see. I'll let you know. I'm sure I'm going to need your help whenever that happens.
Well, girl, call me. I got you. But I just think it's interesting. It's so refreshing to hear that you're focused. You guys are both focused on the same thing. So you're aligned in that, right? Which is your careers.
And trust me, I'm telling him, whenever this is what I tell all my bougie besties when they ask me questions. I'm the type of person that I'm going to tell him, this is the type of ring I want. And maybe I'm going to send him like, I didn't do this yet, but we talked about it. I was like, this is the type of ring I want. This is the type of engagement I want, in a sense, like I want it to be private. I don't want it to be, in Times Square or something like that. I wanted to have it on camera. I'm like, this is like a few things that I want whenever you do decide to propose, because I hope this is going to be my only marriage and I want to remember it the way I always envisioned it. So I kind of told him what I want. And then some girls come to me and they're like, that's not romantic, but okay.
I did the same thing. I picked out my entire ring. I went to the jeweler. I picked the stone. I designed it. And then there's a whole podcast episode on it with Nicole from Ring Concierge. But I handled it all because that's who I am. That's like what I, So I'm on board with that. I respect that. That's the move.
And I'm like, if he's going to spend a lot of money on my ring, and I hope he will, I want it to be the ring I want, because there's nothing worse than when somebody put a lot of time and money and effort towards something and it's just not what you want. And he knows that I'm very specific. So he's like, don't worry, I know your style. We're both very minimal and neutral. Like I don't know if I own a pink item in my closet. So like he knows the style that I have. So he kind of has an idea.
So you are interested in long-term. You've dropped hints, but it's not something that this is very Coco of you. You're not anxious about it. You're just kind of living your life, but you've shared what it is that you want, but you're not on a strict timeline.
No, I'm not anymore. I used to be. I used to think that I should do this by a certain age because that's what all my friends were doing.
I
And I mean,
also had that. Where does this come from?
yeah.
Like, I thought when I was in college that I was going to be married with kids by 28 years old.
In movies, I'm telling you, all the TV shows and movies, I mean, that's the content we consume, and that's why we think it's normal. The same way why we all are comparing ourselves. I mean, not as much anymore, luckily, but like social media, what you see is what you think that you should do as well. And I mean, with my boyfriend now, we're just living life together, and obviously, it would be nice to put something on it, but it's not really necessary. I don't know. I'm happy that I feel very safe. That's the feeling that I think I was looking for my entire life. Just like feeling very safe with someone, knowing that you can call them, they're going to pick up. They're not going to give you a bullshit excuse why they couldn't pick up.
Safety is so important. I think you're right. It's like the bedrock of long-term partnership. Okay, one last question for you before we wrap up, because I feel like we could just gab on for
forever.
hours. So since Loverly is a wedding planning site and we met you at our bachelorette kind of weekend event, what is some of your advice as being a bougie bestie, helping, friends who are going through the wedding planning process or the bachelorette process? I'm sure you get a lot of questions about that. Or even if you are getting ready to attend wedding season this summer as a single person, I'm sure you get tons of questions. What's your kind of advice for someone who's either helping their friend plan a wedding, planning a wedding themselves, and or attending wedding season?
Okay, let's start with the bachelorette. If you are getting married and it is your bachelorette, I think that you need to do whatever you feel like you want to do. So if you want to have a chill weekend and just go to the spa, that's what you should do. If you want to have a crazy weekend and go to Vegas and go to a strip club, or that's what you should do. That's what I personally think, because I think it should be all about you and not what everybody else thinks or wants or something like that. I think that it is kind of hard sometimes to please everybody, so don't even start. Please yourself, like it's your wedding. So do whatever you want to do and be very open with your friends and tell them, listen, this is what I want to do, and if we decide to go on this trip here and there, this is how much it's going to cost. And I understand if some people can't afford it, or maybe this is not your type of, I don't know. I would just be I'm the type of person that I don't want to pressure anybody into doing anything they don't want, because I don't want that in my life. So I would be just very open with my friends and tell them this is what I want to do. And then your maid of honor, she usually helps organize everything, and just have a very open communication with everybody involved. So there's not like questions and people are, maybe they're going to feel uncomfortable. If you are currently planning a wedding, I would always definitely get a wedding planner, because I just think that it is, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And if somebody is, the wedding planning
You're
services,
not the DIY girl.
yeah, no, I think, everybody has their specialties, and planning a huge or a small event is not something I want to personally deal with, because you guys are professionals. So like, why would I try to, I would always get a wedding planner, because I think it's just so much easier, especially if you're doing it overseas or a destination wedding or something like that. Sure. What else was a part of that question?
The wedding guest.
Oh, the wedding guest.
I think this is something that, a lot of people meet their significant others at weddings, right? Because it's like a group of friends, and maybe it's someone from high school who, meets someone from your, career, right? So it's like all these different pollinations, but there's a common thread of people. I personally know a couple people who have met at weddings, and actually Paige on our team, I think her and her husband's like best friends, right? Met, like bridesmaid and groomsmen ended up meeting at the wedding. And
that's crazy.
Or reconnecting, like they knew each other, but like that's where it sparked. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for dating at weddings, or meeting, curated people, right? It's a big social event. So any advice for someone who's single, who's attending a wedding this summer or throughout wedding season?
I think that you should keep an open mind, and I think that and this might be the high maintenance part of me, because that's what all the media called me when I had this viral video. I think you should like dress up just go all out, like for your own style. Just look. Wait, let me rephrase this. Go all out with your outfit, because first of all, you're gonna feel like a princess. You're gonna feel like you are, a walking bombshell that you are. So I think that, like, we just went to a wedding 2 weeks ago, and I was debating what I'm gonna wear, and I was like, oh, I'll just wear this like simple black dress, like whatever. And then I was like, why wouldn't I use this opportunity to get dressed up and get like a long dress and get a bun, like a high bun? I was just like, this is the moment for me to just also dress up. And then when you feel so confident, and when you are going to a wedding, and maybe if you're single and you're like, oh, another wedding, I don't want to go, just go have fun. You're going to meet so many new people. You're going to have a great time. And even if you don't, there's going to be another experience. We're going to learn something about yourself. So I feel like go to that wedding, have an open mind, have a positive attitude, and you never know what's going to happen.
I love that. I love a moment to get glammed up.
Yes.
And I mean, like, it's funny because I feel like back in the olden days, there were all of these galas that people would go to. Like, I'm talking about like early 1900s, right? That's where they would meet people, right? Like, if you watch Bridgerton, they have these like big formal events. And I think that weddings are that opportunity to get glammed up and to have fun and to meet people. So I love that advice. And
wear that dress that you got like 5 months ago, and you're like, one day for a special occasion. This is the special occasion. Why not?
Well, I feel like we could keep chatting for hours because you have just a wealth of knowledge and information. But the good news is, for everyone listening, that Koko was constantly dishing out advice on the daily on Instagram and TikTok and her podcast and her YouTube. So Koko, we are going to link all of your handles and places that people can catch you in the show notes. But quickly here, so everyone who has their phones in their hand, what is like the top place that they could find you?
Thank you for having me on, by the way. I had a great time chatting with you, and I'm definitely going to have you on my podcast. So we're going to talk offline.
Part 2. We'll link to that too.
Part 2. Where can people find me? Well, my name is spelled with a K. So it's Koko Beauty, spelled KOKOBEAUTE. It's the same handle on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. I don't really use, but I have it everywhere. So it's just Koko Beauty, and my podcast is Bougie Best Friend. And that's it. And I love sharing my stories and dating advice, and there's like some makeup tutorials and fashion, and it's just the girly
and if
side.
someone has a question, like you mentioned
Koko
earlier,
every Tuesday and Friday.
I'll be submitting some questions in there. You'll have to screen for those.
I love that. Looking forward to it. It's Friday today, so gotta drop your question.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast and want more inspiration and guidance, check out our new and improved wedding planning platform at loverly.com, where we offer free wedding planning tools and advice to get you hitched without a hitch. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Loverly. Happy planning.